Hey guys, welcome to this video on my Intro to Java series. Today we're going to be going over variables in Java and their application. So we're going to be going over variables. Now variables are something that can hold information in them. So an example of this would be a number. So if I wanted to create a number in Java and store in a variable, I would do something like this. So I would say int my number is equal to 12, let's say. And like I said before, we need to end each sentence with a semicolon to terminate that sentence. So we do this. So what this says to Java is, hey, I want to name a variable, okay? I'm going to call it my number, and I want it to be an integer. And what this does is it stores an integer with the value of 12 in this variable named my number. So Java is what's called a strongly typed language. So when you write a variable, you must specify what type it is. So here we specified that it was an integer. As you can see, we wrote int. That stands for integer. Now, if we were to remove that, Java wouldn't know what this is, and that would cause an error. So we always need to write out our types in Java. This is a strongly typed language. Or something like Python, you could just remove the my number, or you could just remove the int, and Python would understand that my number is an integer. But with Java, it's not like that. Now, this may seem this may seem as an inconvenience to you, but actually, for code clarity and making sure there are no bugs in your code, it can actually be useful to have a strongly typed language. So this is actually one of the main benefits of why I like Java. So apart from numbers, we also have characters or strings of text. So let's do strings of text. So if I just want to write a sentence, then what I do is I write string. Let's name it my string, and we'll name it Java. Now, what this does is similar to this. We store a variable in a variable called myString, and this is a string of text. That's what a string is. Now, a string could even be numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It doesn't need to just be letters. Strings can also store special characters like exclamation marks or percentage signs. Strings can be any string of text, and they're obviously very useful. So next we have, I'm actually going to write just here, just so you have reference. We also have characters. So if you just wanted to store one character in Java, what you do is instead of doing double quotes, and I forgot to address this, but when you're dealing with strings, you need to wrap your string in double quotes like this. But if I wanted to do a single character, what I do is I do single quotes, I do something like D, and then this would work. And also, you cannot put the wrong data type. These are called data types: int, string, char. You cannot put the wrong data type for your variable. For example, this is a char, but if I were to write this as string, this would raise an error because this is not a string. And if we look at the error here, it says change variable my char to type char. So it knows that what you're actually looking for. It's saying, hey, I think what you mean is char because this is not a string. This is just char. So, and then we make that change. Also, I forgot to mention this, but when naming our variables, we have to name our variables something at all times. And in Java, it's traditional to use camel case notation. So let's go back to an int example, the number. So here, your variable names cannot be two words. It cannot be something like this. And to make sure that we have good separation in code clarity and readability in our code, what we do is we capitalize the second word or the third word or whatever word after the first word. So we never capitalize the first word. We wouldn't do something like this, the number. But what we do is for the second word that appears in our variable name, we capitalize. And then if I would say the number is mine, every following word we capitalize the first letter in it. And that is what camel case looks like. Just a naming convention that you'll see not just in Java, but in a lot of programming languages. Now, another data type that we have in Java is called a Boolean. Now, Booleans are essentially a true or false value. So let's name this my Boolean, and I'm just going to name this to be true. Like I said, Booleans are true or false values. So this can either be true or false. And these are important for doing conditional statements where you want to execute code based on what the condition of a Boolean is, and we'll look at this later in future videos for if-else statements and conditionals in general. Now let's actually print this out to show you what these actually look like. So, for example, if I were to print my number, what do you think it would print out? If we run, we will see. Now, it makes sense that it prints out 12. The variable my number is storing the integer 12. And if we do the same thing for my string, we should get Java, as the same thing applies. My string is holding a string of characters called Java, and we do get that. And same thing happens if I print out my char and my Boolean. If I print out my Boolean, I will get the value of false. There we are. Now I can also do something like this. I can create a new variable, so number 2 is equal to 12, is equal to my number. And now if I print out number 2, oops, I get 12, because essentially what we do here is we say, okay, I'm going to name a new variable named number 2, and I want that to be equal my number. And we know that my number is 12, so this is also going to equal 12. We assign number 2 to my number, which was 12. Makes sense. And same thing applies for strings, characters, booleans. We can make them equal to other values. So if I were to have boolean, oops, can't type today, boolean 2 is equal to my boolean, it's going to be the same thing. We're going to get false. Because what we're saying is, I want boolean 2 to equal my boolean, which is equal to false. And we get false. And we can also do something called reassignment. So let's look at my string, for example. Let's say I don't want my string to equal Java anymore. I want it to equal, let's say we want it to equal to Python. So what I can do is I can do my string. Now, because Java knows that this is a string, I do not need to specify this is a string again. It knows that this is a string. So what I can do is I can just do my string is equal to Python. And now when I print out my string, it will say Python. That's what reassignment is like. Now, one last thing. If I were to, let's say, reassign this to the number 1, this obviously wouldn't work because we're saying that my string is equal to a number, but we know that my string is a string as we specified up here. So Java won't accept this, and this creates an error. And those are the basics of variables and data types in Java. Please let me know what you guys like to see in future videos in regards to Java. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Take care, guys.